Now is Laura Blumenfeld, former senior policy advisor on the US State Department's Israeli-Palestinian negotiating team. She's now a Middle East analyst at Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. Good evening to you, Laura. Always very good to see you. Let's just start with the latest developments regarding that ceasefire proposal. Hamas still have issues with the details of that proposal put forward by the United States. And all of this comes just hours after Israel accepted it. Your thoughts on where we are now?
I'm optimistic. I think all sides need a short-term win, and this can provide some short-term relief for everybody. Starting with President Trump, he needs a deal. Ukraine and Iran are looking wobbly, so I do think he's going to be pushing hard to ram this through, and he can tap on his new friend and ally, the Qatari Emir, to put some pressure on Hamas. Hamas hasn't rejected it yet. Hamas will earn 60 days of a ceasefire, some room to breathe, and that's literally. So many leaders have been taken out. It's hard to find. Israelis are finding, it harder and harder to strike targets of Hamas leaders. It also will give Hamas what they're really looking for, which is control of the population. Because if aid resumes through UN mechanisms or other mechanisms, aside from that Israeli-American mechanism during the ceasefire, they can once again assert what they've really prided themselves on, which is delivering for the people. I've spent 30 years speaking with Hamas leaders, whether it was sitting with them face to face, Sheikh Yassin or Abdelaziz Rantisi, Mahmoud Zuhur in Gaza. And what they've always prided themselves on is that they're the folks who can deliver. So that's a plus for them. And finally, for Netanyahu, as we've been watching, there's tremendous domestic pressure on him to deliver some hostages. The Israelis overwhelmingly support a ceasefire, stopping the fighting and bring their people home, their hostages home. And internationally, we saw Chancellor Merz from Germany this week separate himself from Israel. We really haven't seen historically between Germany and Israel. People are almost finding Israel's behavior in Gaza unrecognizable. So that will relieve some of the international pressure as well. All that tells me that a short-term win and we could have a deal.
I do want to touch on the hostage aspect to all of this, because what would be proposed essentially is the release of 10 hostages. We know that there are, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, 20 who remain in Gaza alive, as far as the Israeli authorities are currently aware. For the hostage families, if this is agreed to, this would be another agonizing wait, surely, to see if their loved ones are among those who would be released.
Excruciating for all of them, because they don't have control. Netanyahu says he doesn't have control as to which hostages will be released. They're all considered humanitarian, situations at this point, after over 600 days being held in captivity, starved, in complete darkness, chained, caged. So every single one of those young men deserves to come home on humanitarian grounds, and he can't promise which ones he can deliver. He's pushing to have all 10 hostages released in the beginning, and Hamas is pushing back and saying, we'd like to release them in 2 batches because there's an utter lack of trust between the two parties.
Let's just take a look at the aid situation then for the Palestinians, because under this current text proposal, we understand that there isn't a proposal for the continuation of humanitarian aid as there had been in the previous ceasefire. How much of a sticking point do you think that will be, bearing in mind, according to UN agencies and humanitarian actors there, the aid situation currently is dire?
Well, I do think that all the details haven't been made public, but from my sources, aid could be part of the deal. I think it's important for President Trump personally. He's responsive to optics. I can't imagine that the Witkoff proposal, I understand that there's been some wordsmithing to get them, past some of the sticking points. And I do believe that aid would have to be included. I mean, Americans from the very beginning, whether it's President Biden or President Trump, have really grappled with the aid situation, the humanitarian situation. It's always been a friction point between the United States and Israel.
Just briefly, Laura, Israel announcing the creation of another 22 Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. What do you think that means for tensions, the prospects of a long-term solution, briefly?
Well, you saw me take a deep breath. When I was on the Israeli-Palestinian negotiating team at the State Department, it was always a moment of stress. And I can remember the special envoy almost sort of hitting his forehead when we would get a text about an announcement about settlements. Sometimes this was more just sort of a public relations maneuver by the Israeli government responding to the right-wing domestic politics, and sometimes it was a real concrete problem standing in the way between Israel and Palestinians resolving
We
the
have to
two-state
leave it there.
solution.
Unfortunately, Laura Blumenfeld, we are out of time, but we